3204 and 3203. Please respond to Hermiston High School. We have a report of shots fired at the school.
Where in the school is this occurring?
I just received a call on the business line from a who states that this is occurring in classroom number 35, that there are 5 students injured. The report from him in regard to a hand injury, a back injury, and a stomach injury. We do not know if this is an accurate reporter or if this is a scam call.
3204, in route.
1157.
On February 21st, 2023, emergency dispatchers in Eastern Oregon received a phone call about an active shooter at Hermiston High School.
It was that kind of feeling like at first nobody knew. And we're all looking like nobody knew.
All units are on scene.
More than 20 police officers from around the region responded to the scene. The school went into lockdown. Armed officers entered the building and quickly determined the threat wasn't real. There was no shooter.
Her officers fired can stand down as if this is a false alarm.
It kind of started to click like, okay, this isn't real.
This hoax is a vivid example of the challenge facing police and schools across Oregon and around the country. The onslaught of school threats has terrified students and their families, causing some kids to stay home and forcing the temporary closure of campuses.
Another school in our area has been targeted.
This is one of many that have come in.
Again, the district says school is still canceled going into Friday.
There's no comprehensive data on how often these threats happen, but records obtained from the Oregon Department of Education show over the past 3 years, there's been a significant increase in student discipline for threats of school violence. For the past 2 months, KGW has been investigating these incidents to try and find out what's driving this increase in school threats. And that took us to Hermiston.
Can I dispatch this? How can I help you?
There was a shooter inside the high school asking permission.
The threatening call in February of 2023 came into dispatchers just before noon.
Do we have any updates?
I'm monitoring their channel. They're advising of an individual they're talking to on a landline, advising of 5 injuries.
I mean, we're going to have to go through unless we're told otherwise.
You just can't hear a call like that and not immediately want to respond as fast as you can to assist.
The caller, whose voice was difficult to understand, provided a room number in the high school and claimed to be a teacher.
Most of us have children that are in the school, or we know people who have kids in the school, or we know the teachers or we're related to them, so that takes it to another level as well.
Within about 3 minutes, the responding officers confirmed it was a hoax.
They reached the room that was reported to have the issue, didn't find anything, and they're clearing the building now.
What made this different is that there was the unknown of where did this come from, right? Like who's calling this in?
Our investigation found that same day, there were 7 other school threats across Oregon. The hoax threat sent police officers scrambling to respond, then trying to calm public fear.
I know that there's a lot of concern and angst in the community right now about the reports that we're receiving of active shooters at various schools. I want to assure everyone that these reports so far are false.
Audio of the hoax calls, reviewed by KGW, shows they came from the same voice and seem to provide many of the same details.
Where have they been shot at?
In the classroom, he shot in the classroom. Okay, the first room number 35, math class. Room number 35, math class.
Suggesting it was an orchestrated effort targeting various schools. No arrests have been made.
There's no limitation. It doesn't matter the size of the school, the school district it's in, the state, the city, the county. It's nationwide.
Most school threats are far less sophisticated.
You're going to hear about the gun threats. You're going to hear about the school shooting threats. What you're not going to hear is some of the threats that come from our students who are struggling from mental health or other behavioral issues that create threats within the school walls.
School resource officers say they've become inundated with social media posts displaying images of guns, lists of schools or targets, and threatening warnings to stay home.
You know, kids making statements, well, I'm angry, so I should just shoot somebody, or making those kind of comments. So vague, but yet it's not something we're going to ignore.
School safety researchers say copycat threats typically increase after high-profile shootings, and there's often an uptick at the beginning of every school year, as we saw this fall.
Well, just days after schools in Oregon and across the country saw an uptick in school threats, another school in our area has been targeted.
The vast majority of school threats prove to be nothing. They're unfounded. But
end of the day, you can't afford to be wrong.
No. Your student's life depends on it.
threats of violence are nothing new. But social media and direct messages make them more visible and lasting.
What prompts a student to make a threat?
Well, sometimes those are about students that actually intend to cause disruption, right? So they want to shock people. Maybe they want to cause chaos in their school. But I think that's kind of a small percentage of threats. Most of the threatening communication we see is about kids that are communicating with friends or communicating with others in an inappropriate kind of a way.
School safety experts say parents and kids could be making the problem worse by reposting threats on social media instead of just reporting to police. And those threats may not even be local. It could be Salem, Massachusetts, not Salem, Oregon.
I think sometimes people think they're doing the right thing by reposting those messages, but unfortunately it's just spreading that panic and fear throughout a community.
This increase in school threats raises difficult questions about punishment.
3 of those investigations have led to an arrest.
KGW's review of news reports and police statements indicates in the past 2 years, at least 20 students have been arrested for making threats against schools in Oregon, some as young as 13 years old. But, the FBI notes, not every case results in an arrest following a threat assessment.
We'll work with our local law enforcement partners, go out, we'll ensure that there's no access to weapons, we'll talk to that individual's parents, the school, we'll work with the community to kind of circle around that individual and get them the help that they need.
Even in districts where students and staff have been traumatized by threats, there's a belief the decision maker should consider factors like the nature of the threat and intent behind it.
In all of that, there's sometimes still a child who made that threat, who is hurting or has a need, and how do we support that child and help them meet their needs?
The increase in school threats poses a risk to all schools. The challenge is responding appropriately by taking threats seriously, reporting them to police, and encouraging kids to come forward with concerns.
It's all of our responsibility to keep our communities safe and to keep our schools safe.